Let's zero in on the defense sector as well. It's seen a stellar run in the year 2022. The government has pushed for indigenization as well, and the sector is poised to grow even further. Let's understand what the outlook is when it comes to L&T Defence's plans, where they're seeing their growth projections, their margins, and how they viewed the government's thrust on defense. I caught up with Jayant Patil to discuss what's in store for the sector at their strategic systems complex in Talegaon. Listen in.
Percentage contributions certainly will increase as Larsen to grow. We have let's say about 8-10% we can expect out of the defense alone.
By when?
And typically I expect about 2 to 3 years, and that should happen. Within this year we see the percentage starting to dramatically increase. When I say this year, there's always one rider with Ministry of Defense. The March can always become June, a quarter here or there in terms of our processes, because it's a public money being spent. There's enormous amount of call it checks and balances as part of the system, and that's for good, because at least last many years we have not heard any scams in defense. And that's essentially where it takes time, but at the same time it's a market which truly rewards. And being a sunshine sector, virtually nothing less than 10,000 crores were coming private sector way.
So how do you see the order book growing from 14,000 in defense?
I see certainly at overall L&T level. You mentioned about Larsen to Gro's order book in terms of very large volumes. Now that itself by itself will grow, because we typically go about 10 to between 10 and 15% year on year, and today our base being 3.75 lakh crore will increase. Now defense will outgrow that rate of growth. That's all is the current indication.
So 15 to 20%?
Probably even larger but that's essentially where you may not get all of them year on year in a sustained basis. Defense always tends to be crests and hills, and that's essentially where some amount of I would say orders flow in a cluster. And some obviously will be years, like typically a year before election. 6 months to 9 months after an election remains always a lull time. And normally it's your order book which sustains you through.
Right. You know, there has been a robust order inflow as well for L&T within the defense sector. Walk us through some of the recent major orders that you bagged, and what can we expect on the anvil?
In fact, some of the absolute major ones which are just about to be getting into the order book right this year. What you see around is whole lot. But besides that, I would say the 2 classes of warships that we recently won, and one of them we already signed a contract, second we are about to be signing a contract. We have the bridging equipment, entire army bridging equipment, irrespective of whether it's a small 5-meter bridge or to a 75-meter bridge, is all made by Larsen to Gro, designed and developed here. Now this is essentially where you start seeing the bridging equipment when we see a contract beyond 2,000 crores. So these are something. This year we also see some extremely high power long range radars. You see one somewhere there. And that's essentially where you start getting into now extremely high value add to completely shut what India used to import some years back. So weapons today, this factory alone produces about 40 types, different types. We then moved into radars, we moved into warships, we moved into submarines, and for each of these segments we see major orders. We see the K9 Vajra repeating this year.
I wanted to ask you about that, the K9 Vajra. What is the update on the additional order for that, the battleship management systems, Pinaka, etc.? What is the update on some of those?
Pinaka right now is in the order book. We are executing. Obviously, there will be one more repeat of Pinaka, but probably, to my mind, should not be within next 1.5 years. It probably will be thereafter. But there's something very wonderful which we did in last 2.5 years. And as a part of that, we call it the close-in weapon system. And we named it very aptly Sudarshan. So it's the Lord Krishna's kind of a weapon which can do anything, because it's in a way mythological, but to that sense, you can throw it and it will destroy anything and come back.
Right.
Now in our case, of course, a close-in weapon system was inclusive of right from radars to command control to guns, and a full-fledged system, we actually won that contract. So it's in now yet to get into order book, about to get into at some point in time by the time the financial year unfolds. But those are orders which obviously one can expect in a very, very quick time and quite large. Now order sizes are now growing.
What's the average order size now?
Typically today, as I said, the modular bridge is little more than 2,000. We'll see the close-in weapon system to be more than 6 to 7,000.
Okay.
And that's an
So
indication.
where will you close your order book by year end for defense?
As I said, for this year, when I always say the March can become June, but we probably should be at least doubling from where we are.
From the current 14,000 to about
14,000.
28,000.
14,000.
Fair enough. When it comes to India looking at a lot of export opportunity as well with artillery systems, military equipment, etc. What about exports as a contribution of your overall revenues, and how do you see it?
Today in defense, whatever we do, about 10% is typically in the form of exports. 90% is for our armed forces.
Right.
And primarily, the business was started primarily to look at our own armed forces to become, as Modi ji talked about, being Aatmanirbhar.
Yes.
So we were one of the part of that Aatmanirbhar story. Before the Prime Minister articulated it, we created that Aatmanirbhar. What you see around, you won't find any foreign equipment which with a transfer of technology has come here. That's essentially where Larsen & Toubro's relationship with defense research becomes important. It's nearly, as I said, 3.5–4 decades of work. As a result, across systems, complete platforms on one side, we today have a factory which builds battle tanks. We have a factory to build warships, submarines. We do military communications, we do radars, we do all weapons for the army as well as air force and navy. So that's essentially where, except I would say the full-fledged radar, we do everything.
Okay.
The major other aspect of future wars, future-proofing our armed forces, and that's essentially where the unmanned systems become extremely important. Because war is not going to be fought hand to mouth, which is typically what even today we see with some of our neighbors happening. But this is going to be unmanned at long distances. A long distance unmanned war is fought through what we call as the unmanned systems. Now we are focusing on unmanned on ground, on water, underwater and in air.
Right.
So all 4 domains of unmanned war, we are putting our research money today into the unmanned sector very sizably, and those are major platforms besides what we already do. Will start coming into a product and in terms of sales.
So going forward, which are some of the key projects that you are currently L1 in for defense?
As I mentioned, the close-in weapon system, we
Yeah.
are L1. High power radar, we are resultant single party because the only company that performed was that. The modular bridge, it's our own product, so it's an IDDM specifically categorized as per that. Vajra repeat, obviously in pipeline, which is a matter of repeat order for us. So it's a proven capability which essentially today is getting Larsen & Toubro an ability to get in more business out of our own existing capabilities. Of course, there's much hard work that went in behind. Because Vajra was designed for desert. It was supposed to be Rajasthan, Punjab, that border. We actually put in Vajra something far beyond what anybody asked. And that's exactly where Vajra, when tested in Ladakh, actually turned out to be an amazing weapon system. And that's essentially what created a pull for this repeat order. When you develop a new product, if you stretch your mind into beyond what the customer has asked, we believe being primarily an R&D driven organization, having done R&D purely for 2 decades before any single tender could come to any private sector company, that's essentially where we believe that doing something which is stretching your minds ahead actually rewards, and that's essentially time for reward now.
Wanted to know the update when it comes to with Garden Reach Shipbuilders. There were some warships, and what is happening with respect to Mazgaon dock as well, because there was a potential submarine order, 45,000 crore rupees. I believe there's been some delays on that front. Could you walk us through the latest on both these?
On the GRSC ships, in fact, you touched a very important point, Avan. And the history of this program is it was competitive. We had lost it.
Okay.
GRSC actually won
Right.
2 major contracts. One they won on their own, second they won along with Cochin Shipyard. Since they didn't have a capacity, it was extremely mature dialogue, because for decades of relationship that we enjoy with GRSC as a customer. So the CMD of GRSC at that point in time was Admiral VK Saxena. VK Saxena and me got talking, saying that he said, I don't have capacity. I said, my yard is khali. And that's
So
exactly
that's how
where
you
we
came
created
together.
an amazing PPP.
Right.
So this PPP model, truly we believe that that's the way to go for in future, where irrespective of who invested into a facility, Larsen Toubro invested or the government of India invested, each of these facilities today can produce for each other. Now the ship which we launched is actually the first of the ASW corvette.
Okay.
Of course, we built 3 more ships for them before, but this is the 4th one, another 3. So we are going to be building 7 ships for GRSC.
Okay.
On the submarine program, you very rightly mentioned again, it's a very, very large order, probably a lifetime single largest order
Yes.
one can probably expect. And of course, order sizes will keep going up in future. This is a 43,000 crore as per its clearance value. Of course, the time is passing. As time passes, the cost keeps getting built up because inflation keeps happening. The rupee dollar scenario will make it more expensive. But the submarines are in pipeline on a firm path. There's further extension that had to come. Obviously, some issues with respect to the tender.
So
and
any
they are
update
getting
as
addressed.
to okay.
We expect about another 7-8 months
Okay.
it to be at a stage where the bids would have happened.
So, Mr. Patil, we were discussing orders, etc. But when it comes to defence, also there seem to be some problems or concerns when it comes to delays, procedural processes. Have you been witnessing that, or have you seen a lot of those issues ironed out?
I think it needs some amount of conditioning to get into defence market. It does tend to be very, very slow, and all of us who are long timers believe that the pace comes in more because of the responsibility that we are a democracy. Anybody can ask any question.
Right.
And I think that's essentially where we know that what possibly can happen in a year takes 3.
Right.
And that's the pace at which things happen.
Are you worried about newer players, newer private players as well entering the space? Would that impact profitability in any sense?
For Larsen Toubro, obviously, we take competition very seriously because anyone who's not in a protected market would need to be so. Fact is, we believe that the future is all about doing things here, the Aatmanirbhar,
Right.
what the Prime Minister talks. Larsen Toubro's DNA is in Aatmanirbhar because when the company was founded, it started that day. World War came in, the founders had nothing to do except doing things on their own, and that became the psyche of our organization, that we still do things, a lot of them our own way. Now it makes a huge difference in competitive game. The CIWS that I talked of, the close-in weapon system, we had an Indian solution, indigenous IP, indigenous know-how, and obviously we are L1. So when a foreigner brings in knowledge, obviously the foreigner in that case charges you for the knowledge, and that's essentially becomes a part of the cost. So if you are on a long-term focus, you need to have your own capabilities, and that to that extent, at least for some period, we believe Larsen Toubro will have a differentiator.
Right.
If others start investing, we are one of the largest investors in R&D. I started my career in R&D, and that's essentially where this is what actually keeps us ahead of most, because what you see in terms of the breadth at a place of this nature, or for that matter across my 7 manufacturing locations, this is not something which today most in the industry can talk of.
Right.
Now that's essentially where serious segment wise, but overall we are in a differentiated position more because of doing things our own way.
What about entering, drone manufacturing? Is that something that you would look at with the government looking at a ban of import of drones?
In fact, when we talk of drones, bit misunderstood word, the mini and micro will not get in. It's highly crowded market, and probably the entire that segment of market is Chinese imports.
Right.
While we are looking at extremely large drones, and that's what I said, the unmanned segment, whether it's an underwater mini submarine, it's still called a drone.
Okay.
So the entirety of that is where today Larsen & Toubro is putting on enormous amount
Large
of our own
drones
R&D,
as
our
well?
own money, very, very large drones,
Okay.
which can stay for like 3 days, 5 days, 7 days in air.
Is there an investment? What's the investment that's being made for this?
Today we put in typically about 15% of what we actually get at beyond EBITDA. I mean just the cash earnings.
Okay.
We put them in our